Aloha. Welcome to American Issues Take One. I'm Tim Apicella, your host, and today's title is The Noose is Tightening, Trump's Power Grab. You know, we've all watched since last 100 and some odd days, the DOGE cuts. Databases have been breached by Elon Musk and his minions. Whole agencies have been gutted, the IRS, USAID, Social Security Administration, FAA, FBI, DOJ, DOD. I have a lot more acronyms, but we don't have time. Attacks on the arts and media community have occurred. We have the U.S. role in the global environment community has been thwarted. Worldwide tariffs have impacted the economy, not only for the United States, but worldwide implications. We have insulted our allies, Canada, Mexico. Trump has intimidated the legal profession and the Ivy League universities, specifically Harvard. And by the way, not to forget, he recently posted himself as Pope, an AI-generated image that Donald Trump was dressed in Pope regalia. Is Trump's sphere of power increasing? And to discuss this topic, I'm here with my esteemed guest, David Larson, who's a law professor at Mitchell Hamline School of Law in St. Paul, Minnesota. Ben Davis, professor of law at the University of Toledo in Ohio. And Chuck Crumpton, decades expert of mediation and solution providing. And of course, CEO of ThinkTech Hawaii, my co-host, Jay Fidell. Good morning, gentlemen. Jay, let's go to you. You know, when it comes to power, a lot of power is the illusion that you have the power, that you send a message to all that your power is overwhelming. And I'm talking about in the case of Trump here, your power is overwhelming, and to stand up to it is futile, and it may cost you personally if you dare stand up to my power. Guess what? Harvard has stood up. Perkins Coie of Seattle, law firm, has stood up. The federal courts has stood up. Are these cracks in the veneer of power, or is Trump just successful at creating an illusion of power? What do you think?
He's going to lie when he gets a chance. My favorite is when he says he's in negotiation with Xi Jinping, and Xi Jinping says, no, he's not. Or when he's got an arrangement with Libya to deliver deportees to Libya. And Libya, the following day, says, no, he doesn't have an arrangement like that. So the lying continues. And I really think that, the essence of this discussion has to be around psychology. He's about to celebrate his 79th birthday, June 14th. Everybody knows that because that's the day of the parade, right? Happens to be synonymous with the Army's birthday. What about the Navy and the Air Force and the Coast Guard, for example? But anyway, we all know his birthday, and we're going to know it more because he's going to have tanks roiling the streets of Washington. He's going to have 6,600 people. Talk about narcissism. He wanted to do that in his first term. Now he's going to do that again, or try. So anyway, what I'm saying is a psychology matter. The impression I get, worthy of discussion, is that he is failing now, approaching his 79th birthday. And he can't hold it together. And Mark Carney, really roasted him in that footage from the Oval Office. And Mark Carney roasted him again when Mark Carney made, comments to the press after that meeting in the Oval Office. And Trump couldn't handle it. And I was really surprised. I thought he'd come up with stuff like he came up with in Zelensky and made a monkey out of Zelensky. But in fact, Carney made a monkey out of him. So I think he's failing. And really, the question is looking through the lens of the media, which we have to do that because that's what we have. I think we're finding, or we should find, that Trump is not who he pretends to be, and that somebody else is running the country. When he gets up in the morning, he doesn't have these bright ideas. Somebody else has these ideas. And the people around him are really mean and nasty, indecent people. And they are telling him what they think he should do. And he does it. He's suggestible. That happens. So I think part of this noose is tightening concept here. It may be tightening, but it may not be Trump.
Chuck, I hope I don't put you on the spot here, but concerning Donald Trump's power and the challenges to his power, both by the media and what we see in the court, the judicial system. You sent an email yesterday or 2 days ago regarding a massive lawsuit, and I wonder if you would talk a little bit about this particular lawsuit and just how expansive it is that's challenging the power of Donald Trump in the presidency and his authority.
Well, you're referring to a suit that was filed in Oregon by a wide range of groups there against a very wide range of administration components. And among the claimants in the lawsuit is the former ethics czar of the federal government. So it's interesting that they've essentially included in the claims pretty much all of the violations of constitutional, statutory, ethical, moral, social justice principles they can find. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with it. In specific areas, we're seeing that actions are being taken by federal judges. And one of those that I think is particularly striking in North Carolina, after the gerrymandered North Carolina Supreme Court said you could throw out enough ballots to get the Republican nominee who lost the election, which was admittedly done according to all the election rules with several recounts confirming it. Federal judge has rejected that claim by the Republican candidate. The Republican candidate has now said, okay, the Democrat has won. It's still going to be a decided minority on the North Carolina Supreme Court. Whether the momentum and the conflict are shifting to the streets with demonstrations that are recurring on a regular basis, to the courts that are standing up to this, to law firms, to universities that are standing up to this. If those groups coalesce and ally, you look at a completely different picture. And I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on where that might go.
Chuck, if I'm an American that's even a former good old-fashioned GOP voter or an independent, or one who's been biting their nails as a Democrat, should I feel better based on what I've seen in the last maybe 30 days as far as all these legal challenges and some of these court decisions being upheld, demonstrations in the street, things of that nature? Would you feel better or business as usual, that Donald Trump's noose of power is tightening around the throat of democracy?
I'm wondering whether it's maybe neither, but the same thing that the media and the stock market has identified is an increasing sense of uncertainty, of doubt as to where this is going and where the momentum is headed. You're seeing that among retailers, you're seeing that among state, local governments, many others.
To what degree do you think his dive off the deep end of the diving board, where there's no water in the pool, has to do with his tariffs announcement and the lack of planning on how and who the tariffs would be implemented against?
Well, that's kind of centered and triggered it. But what's interesting is that despite the stock market fluctuations up and down and loss and recovery and stuff, generally, the sense of the economy is less confident than it has been in a long time, since before the pandemic. That's going to hurt. And Republicans know that. And I see nods from Ben, Jay, and David that indicate that may start to come home to roost.
Are we just waiting for the economic data to catch up?
No, I think it has caught up, because the ordinary citizen, for the retailer, for the small business, 99% of America's businesses by volume are small businesses. That's where it's hitting. That's where it's felt. And those are also your consumers,
Okay.
both commercial and individual.
I'm just not convinced that we've seen shortages on the shelves, which I think we all know may be forthcoming. And I'm not convinced that we're seeing dramatic increases on other consumer goods. But maybe you're right. Maybe it is being felt, and maybe the media just hasn't caught up to it yet. Okay, thanks, Chuck. Hey, Ben, from day one, you were out there on this show and other shows here at ThinkTech Hawaii talking about the importance to stand up to Trump, the importance of resistance, and my hat's off to you for doing such. I mean, in the early days of Trump's second administration, I think a lot of people were intimidated. I didn't see that from you. I saw just the opposite. I saw resistance. So many thanks. Where do you see the next big opportunity for resistance, be it in the courts, be it in institutions like Perkins Coie law firm or Harvard University? Where's the next big opportunity for resistance?
Bringing us back to those days, do you remember when I used to say what Musk would be gone in a month? Remember?
I did.
And everybody was saying, oh, no, right? Well, where we are, we're at 3 months. Okay, I was a little early, right? I was a little early. I admit I was a little early. But Musk is gone. Tesla is literally on life support right now, right? 71% decline in profits, I think they are. Their business around the world is destroyed. They're going to be a demonstration at the new, just opening Tesla place here in Charlottesville before it even opens. Okay. So, I tell you that because no one thought that would happen at the time, but it was a concerted effort of people to push back. And like they said in the movie Trading Places, the best place to hit a rich man is in his wallet. And that's exactly what people did in going after Tesla. Same with the boycott of Target. I think the head of Target just had his compensation cut 45% because of the traffic has gone down so much, you see? So I take no credit because I read Timothy Snyder's book early on tyranny, and he basically said, and some of the other people who had to deal with authoritarians, that you have to start from the beginning. Right now, at the beginning, as soon as they show up, you start to fight them in ways that you try to find a way. So, so where do we get to now? Well, one of the things I think is really maybe important to look at is look what Columbia did. Look at what Harvard's doing. Who's looking better? Look at Perkins Coie and look at, say, Paul Weiss. Who is looking better? And I think I saw Microsoft recently got rid of one of those firms that had bent the knee and is now gone with Jenner and Block that said no. So there are these kind of things like that I say are even in, and I agree with Chuck, there's the uncertainty. But just imagine if none of that had happened, if there had been silence for the last 100 days and all that would have been happening in this country. If no one was pushing back, just imagine if it had been silence the whole time. And the fact that there was, and there will continue to be, efforts to push back is basically the citizens kind of supporting the courts. And it's sort of another angle on this, since Congress is not doing it, but kind of supporting the courts and striking fear, I think, into the hearts of those members of Congress who are trying to enable this. And that has to continue. Trust me, I understood, I saw recently, I think this yesterday, that in Long Beach, a port that the ships from China were down like 40% in terms of what they had on it. Those have just arrived, okay? And those are going to flow into the economy, and the consequences of that are going to flow into the economy in the second quarter. They're saying the second quarter is going to be particularly significant on all that. And that's going to hit more people because one of the economists I was watching was saying that for every, I think, 2% increase in tariffs, it squares the pain. So if we had 2% tariffs and we went to 4%, it's not 2% more pain, it's 4% more pain. And he was basically saying that in the country, when they were sort of selective tariffs, they kind of hit different areas. But with this kind of cross the board tariff thing, the economists talk about like a 50 times impact. Like everything you go to buy at a store or do in your normal life gets hit by these price increases, and people with their budgets are not able to keep up. And trust me, to me, all those things together are the pushback. And I also personally, and I'm going to go with Jade here, would just like to say that I think Trump is not capable of dealing with what he's, what is the thing? If you sow the wind, you reap the storm or something like that. He has got the storm. He's got the storm. And he has no real clue. And I doubt if anyone around him has no real clue about how to manage what is coming. And then that's really going to be very difficult because we don't have that kind of leadership, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, Ben. David, of all the things we've seen Donald Trump do since he took the oath of office for a second time, throwing everything but the kitchen sink in to consolidate his power, what specific area have you seen Donald Trump try to employ as far as consolidation of power that has you the most concerned, and why?
I think it's probably the refusal to acknowledge that he has, as president, responsibility to uphold the Constitution, as he raised questions in his NBC interview when asked whether it's his obligation. He says, "I don't know." So that's his justification for not allowing due process. And this idea that even though we're a country where due process is fundamental to our democracy, I don't know if it's necessary. And if you're trying to consolidate power, well, that's a way to do it. There's an efficient way to do it. Just don't respect due process and start making a lot of unilateral decisions. So that refusal to recognize and apply due process and to respond to court directives to provide that due process, that combination, I think, is very disturbing and troubling.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Remember the days in the presidential campaign where he proclaimed that he would be dictator for a day, and then the media responded and reacted quite strongly to that comment. And of course, he was said, "Well, I was just being flippant. I was just, kidding around." Do you perceive his comment about "I don't know whether he'd followed the rule of due process" was just a flippant comment, or was there something more serious and sinister behind those words?
I think I suspect the latter. That the message is I'm suggesting that I don't think I need to abide by that. I think there's questions about it, and to degree, if there are legitimate questions about it, then I guess I can defensively say that there's no obligation for me to respect those rights. So that's very troubling. Now, you asked Chuck about hope, and are there any reasons for hope? And then Ben talked a little bit about tariffs, and so did Chuck. If you remember James Carville in the Clinton administration, it's about the economy, stupid. We, as Ben mentioned, the ships from China are only now starting to decline and not come at all, or come with what's much less cargo. So people, I don't think yet have really felt the effect of the tariffs, but they will. And I think when they start feeling the effects of these tariffs, and as Ben mentioned, these tariffs are across the board. So people, it doesn't matter whether you're a consumer, whether you've got a small business, people in all different roles in life are going to feel the effects of these tariffs. And when that happens, I think that's when the momentum will really start building. Just recently, I think it's Tom Tillis from North Carolina. Trump was nominating Ned Martin to be the Attorney General for the District of Columbia. And Tillis came back and said, strong Trump supporter said, I can't support that nomination, because Ed Martin was has consistently defended the January 6th rioters, thinks they're great people, shouldn't have been prosecuted. Tillis says, no, they committed crimes. We've got to recognize that. And to put this person as the district attorney or the U.S. attorney for this particular jurisdiction, that's intolerable. That's unacceptable. So I think to the degree that we're beginning to see some of that kind of pushback from individuals that we didn't expect to see on the one hand, and then believing that, again, the effects of the tariffs still really haven't been felt, but they will be felt. I think there is hope, growing hope. And and we've alluded to some of the law firms that are pushing back. Well, to the degree that you get a couple examples, and this is also what Ben referred to, when everybody can see some examples of people pushing back and having some success pushing back, they get inspired that maybe I can do that too. And so those leading examples are critical and extremely valuable because they assure people that I'm not necessarily alone. And there's that they're like-minded people and like-minded entities with which I can align myself, and I can have some success that way. So I think there is hope. And then finally, picking up on something Jay said, I think people are starting to notice even more than before this idea that maybe our president is declining even more than we thought he had already. And if you listen to the recent discussions about 9-year-olds and 13-year-olds and 50-year-old dolls, and 1, 2, 3, or 30 dolls, and 250 pencils. You don't need 250 pencils. You could get along fine with 5. So the economy is going to be just fine. It's so the illusions and metaphors are so insane that that I think people are starting to notice, what is he talking about? He has no grasp on reality.
Just on that vein, before I go on to Jay, on whether or not he's unraveling, we've been talking about that for years. He's unraveling, and it's going to get worse, and somehow it doesn't. Or the media has been desensitized to his unraveling and really doesn't report on it. But I've got to chime in with you and agree with you that him posting himself as the Pope really pissed off a lot of Catholics, conservative and liberal Catholics alike. And certainly there was a response from the College of Cardinals that they didn't appreciate him doing that after Francis had recently been, interred in the ground. So the question is just to what degree is he unraveling emotionally, mentally? I guess news at 11, I guess. But thanks for bringing that up, David. Okay, hey, Jay, this may be premature, but we do have midterm elections, and obviously in the past with Clinton and other presidents, Obama had his day with midterms. Is it too soon to talk about midterms and how that will maybe balance the arena of power for Donald Trump? Or is it just too early to talk about it and we just have to hope for the courts to stabilize Donald Trump's his quest for power, and will that have to just do until the midterms arrive?
Oh, complicated question because it's a little far off. But I would say that he's already got a problem on the midterms. Even the Republicans are talking about that. They're talking about pretty much what we're talking about, that's going to catch up with people when they have to pay more and there's nothing on the shelves and all that. They care about that. And the price of an egg, what have you, what he was promising. On the other hand, remember this, that if you take my suggestion that he's failing, if you take my suggestion that we live in a time of Charlie McCarthy, remember him, you guys, Charlie McCarthy, that somebody else is behind him making his mouth move. And I really firmly believe that. And I believe it's actually Stephen Miller or somebody like that. I don't think it was Elon Musk, but Elon Musk might have occupied a similar role. Is that he's not making the decisions anymore. And he has trouble defending the decisions that other people are suggesting to him. And when the decision is really bad, such as it was when he was in the Rose Garden, delivering tariffs to the whole world, they took him back to his office and they said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And he changed his mind a few days later. A few hours later with the pause. So, I'm not sure that he has it. I'm not sure that he's not being controlled by somebody else. That happens. It happens, and it's happened a number of times in the Oval Office where somebody else is really running things. And as Trump declines, it's more likely the case. I would say to you, yes, we anticipated something like this, Tim, but it didn't happen. I think it's happening now. And I think it's more evident now. The problem vis-a-vis the midterms is this. One of these days, he's not going to be able to back up. Let's talk about the tariffs, for example, which are going to have a terrible effect, not only on the US, but on the world economy. It's not just China, it's all these other countries too. And what's going to happen is he can't reverse himself. He can't keep on giving pauses. He can't make deals. They have his number. They're not going to make deals with him. He's demonstrated weakness. One of the things that Lawrence O'Donnell said, which we have talked about here on the show, is right now, all of the rhetoric aside, he hasn't made a single deal. Can I say that again? He hasn't made a single deal with anybody, nobody. And he's certainly not going to be able to make a deal with Carney in Canada or in Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico and so forth. So what happens when he can't make a deal? What happens when he can't do pause after pause? What happens? He has to change the subject. He or Stephen Miller or the advisors around him, none of which has any moral compass whatsoever. He has to change the subject to something else. This is like the mouse that roared with Dustin Hoffman years ago. Change the subject. Have a phony war. Have a real war. And so I think that in the cards between now and the midterms, we are going to have distractions, big time. And he is going to try to get us off that topic. And he is going to try, of course, to suppress voting as well, for sure. But primarily, he is going to change the world in ways that terrify us, that where we no longer are so focused on the tariffs and the shelves and inflation. And that is what we can expect.
Okay, well, let me just circle around because I think he's been successful with all these great distractions. And if you really look behind the curtain, he's making a lot of money. He's making a lot of money in his companies for electronic coin and these deals that, not in the millions, but potentially in the billions of dollars is going to line his pockets. The emollient clause never seems to be enforced, never has been enforced with Donald Trump. And I guess the question is this all one big charade to detect what's happening behind the curtains and all the revenue that he's going to generate for himself and the family when we're not looking?
I agree. I totally agree. He's a real estate guy from Queens, right? What is he interested in? He's interested in manipulating people and in lying and finding a way to make money. And that was it for him. And that's what it is for him now. So there's two faces here. Charlie McCarthy has two faces. And one of the faces is the secrecy face behind the curtain, where he tries in every which way to make money. Remember, Jared got $2 billion from the Saudis. How can you trust that relationship? How can you trust Trump? You can't. And this thing with cryptocurrency, he's been buying and selling cryptocurrency. And then he said with the tariffs, he said, time to buy right now at the bottom of the curve. So I think that one of his primary knee-jerk primitive reactions is to try to scam the country and make money on every single possibility. And I therefore agree with you. But I don't think that's his priority in terms of the second tier of this. The second tier is to lie. The second tier is to have the people around him do bizarre things and keep it going, keep it up in the air, keep it uncertain, and in the sense that must somehow help him. It doesn't, but that he thinks it does. Yes, fundamental center of the channel for him is to try to be the richest man on earth. And that's what he is built for.
All right. Well, I wish we could continue the discussion, but we've run out of time. So what I'd like to do is go around the virtual table here and get your last thoughts. I will start with you, Chuck.
No, I hope that we start looking at the people and the actions and the effects around Trump rather than focusing on him. Mm-hmm. Look at what's happening in defense relations, in foreign trade relations. Look at what's happening within the U.S. economy at the grassroots level. Look at what's happening in education, what's happening in healthcare, because those are the things that are going to impact the people who are going to wind up making a choice in a couple of years if they get the opportunity. And that's still somewhat in question, as Jay has aptly raised. So,
okay,
that's the question.
Nice observation. David, to you.
Yeah, I really like Chuck's suggestion to focus on facts. Let's not forget, when the Biden administration ended, we had 2.8% inflation and 3% unemployment. Now, remember that when we get to October, November. Remember what those inflation rates were, because the current president is saying that anything bad happening is a result of the Biden administration, and all the good things happening, and there's fewer and fewer of those all the time, are a result of my policies. So I think trying to be as objective as we can, statistical, let's focus on what is actually happening with inflation and compare it to what it was a year ago. Look at what federal funding was for housing. The current proposal from the president is to cut federal housing funding by 43%. What are the consequences of that going to be? They're going to be severe for millions of Americans. So it's interesting to focus on things like I did a few minutes ago, the discussion about dolls and pencils. But again, that is a distraction, and we really do need to pay attention to the facts in terms of what actually is happening with inflation, what's happening with unemployment, how are people's lives being challenged, and as kind of delicious as it is to focus on some of these carnival acts, we got to stay focused.
Mr. Davis?
I would just go along with what has been said, and maybe the only thing I would add is, and I saw this being commented on recently, which is that we also should, open up the sort of aperture on our minds to say that it's not a Trump thing, it's a Republican thing. Because all of these Republicans who have been going along with this out of whatever it was, fear or greed or whatever, they are the culprits. Let's not be naive. They are not just sort of innocents looking on from the side. They are part of this, and they seem to have had eagerness. And I would go as far as to say all these different people who we see in business or other segments of the economy who are going along, quote unquote, to get along. They're all part of this. They're all part of this. It's not Trump is maybe the tip of the spear, but we have to be sensitive to just how deep this kind of situation is. And if you start to open the aperture a little more like that, I think that what you see is that there is really a very difficult struggle for the soul of America that we're going through right now, where basically, what is it? Corruption and tax cuts for the rich and essentially disdain for anyone who has any kind of vulnerability, as opposed to compassion. That's that's sort of the vision of these folks. And the question is always, is that who we are as a country? Because I don't think that's who we are from the Americans that I know. That that's not who we are. The idea that going after these foreigners, a lady just had a baby. She had a baby, and they were looking to deport her. That's not how we thought. I mean, when Trump was running, he was saying he was going to go after the worst of the worst. You remember that? Anybody? And people say he supported, we all supported him. He was very clear about saying he was kind of going after, I don't know, the serial killer foreigner to have them deported, right? But that's not what's happening. They're going after the low hanging fruit. These students with their little op-eds and things like that. I mean, these are not people that are threatening any of us. And I don't think most Americans would think it's reasonable or it's right to be going after somebody who's been here 30, 35 years or whatever it is. Granted, they came across illegally, quote unquote, but they're not the people that we're worried about. They're not the ones that should be deported after due process. They're just people who happen to be here. And, we got to do something to make sure that they don't hide out, because I think one of my biggest worries, and somebody said this and it was very chilling, is that somewhere in America right now, there is somebody hiding like Anne Frank. And that's not who we are. That's not who we are. We don't want people hiding like Anne Frank. And that's just chilling among our, immigrant population.
No, that's a good statement to end on. And I think a lot of Americans agree with you. I also think a lot of Americans wanted tougher policies regarding immigration, but like the first term, it's how you do it. And when you're ripping children, infants from the arms of parents at the border, I don't think Americans thought that's how it was going to go in the first term of Donald Trump. And this is no different. And I think, fortunately, a lot of Americans say, well, I don't know what due process is exactly, but I think it should be available. And I think the poll numbers support that. So your points are well made, Ben, and thank you very much for those points. Jay, you get the last word.
Yeah, we think we know what America should be, and we want America to be that model. But in fact, it's a moving target. Every day there are children born and people die. The electorate changes, the base changes. And I think that Trump or Edgar Bergen, remember Edgar Bergen, has an influence on people. And if you keep repeating the lies and you keep on doing the rhetoric with them year after year for a changing base, a changing electorate, you may reach them. You may maintain their loyalty to you. So, I'm not sure that we can convince them, then them being the moving target, that we can, actually fix this. I always come out pessimistic, as you guys know, but I'm very concerned that we won't be able to resurrect the America that we thought we'd have. And finally, on Trump himself, I am increasingly concerned that the people around him are not qualified, not competent, and not moral. And they may have greater power going forward. And this is of great concern because they will not tell us who's running the government. So all things considered, there are terrible things happening in the country, no question about it. But people are getting confused. And I think if you look at the discussion we've had today, we're in deep water. We're all in deep water, and it's like you walk out from the shore into the water and you begin sinking and surrounded by lies and confusions and distractions. And it's really up to us, and I mean just us, we guys here, to maintain, as David says, a rationality, a focus on facts, a scientific approach, if you will, because I think what's happening is suggests national confusion, and I think that's what he's trying to do, or Edgar Bergen is trying to do that.
Well, I want to thank my guests for a thoughtful discussion, and I'd like to put an invitation out for those who are watching this. There's an opportunity to comment. We'd love to see your comments and opine about what you thought about this discussion today. So I'd like to thank my esteemed guests, Chuck Crumpton, David Larson, Ben Davis, and my co-host, as always, Jay Fidell. This is American Issues Take One, and I'm Tim Apicella, your host. And until next week, aloha.